My friend Alina always wanted to be a superhero. That's right, not just liking superheroes, but actually wanting to be one. Back in middle school, he made his own costume and mask. He spent a lot of time patrolling our neighborhood trying to stop crime until I was in 10th grade. You might have heard about people like him in the news or seen them in movies like Kick-Ass. Our neighborhood where Alina and I lived had a lot of crime and drug dealing going on. The tricky part for Alina was that we lived in Minnesota, a state that, at that time, didn't allow people to wear masks in public. Things have changed since then. While most police officers who visited our neighborhood found Alina's masked adventures amusing, there was one cop who didn't tolerate it. Officer Jordan. He really didn't like Alina, or as he called himself, the depths. Officer Jordan always insisted that Alina take off his mask and not walk around in disguise. I'll tell you more about him in a bit. Alina's superhero outfit was actually pretty cool. It was all black. The fabric was sleek but not too loose, and the mask was made of tough black plastic shaped like a skull. The eye lenses had a shiny silver tint. Alina spent a whole year working on it. Instead of hanging out or doing homework after school, he would go to the basement and sew up his costume. I kept suggesting he could just buy a Halloween costume from Kmart, which would be easier, but he was determined to make his own. Alina really loved Batman, and like Batman, he only did his superhero activities at night. This helped him escape Officer Jordan a few times when he was being chased, so he wouldn't get caught without his mask. The dark alleys were the perfect hiding spots for him in his outfit. A lot of people, including teachers and most adults in our neighborhood, thought Alina was not mentally well or not very smart. But honestly, I don't think that's true. Alina was an average smart kid, but he was focused on things that kept him from getting good grades or learning things that could help him get a job. He wasn't crazy. He had just been through a lot. Alina's parents got divorced when he was 5, and it wasn't a typical situation. His dad had serious gambling debts, and his mom was hooked on drugs. Just imagine what life was like for Alina when all three of them lived together. Instead of a proper divorce, they just separated, and neither of them was fit to raise Alina. So, he went to live with his grandfather. When his grandpa passed away, Alina ended up in foster homes, changing families 7 times in 4 years. Eventually, he landed back in our neighborhood with his older third cousin, Howie. But their relationship wasn't great. Howie worked odd hours at a supermarket warehouse and didn't have much time or patience for Alina. I remember going with Alina, also known as the Depths, a few times when he patrolled the streets at night looking for trouble. I don't know why, but for some reason he didn't mind me knowing his secret identity. When you live in the neighborhood, everyone pretty much knows everything about each other. One night, we went out because there was news of a serial rapist in the area. I wasn't wearing a costume, but Alina and his sidekick Greyjoy were. Trying to be a real-life superhero might be a bit sad, but being the sidekick to a fake superhero? That's not the greatest thing. Mostly, we just sat on a cold street corner drinking coffee and soda, trying to spot anything suspicious. After an hour and a half, Greyjoy and I had enough. There was nothing there except a few drunks, crazy people talking to themselves, and maybe a lady in a long coat who might be a hooker. But Alina, also known as the Depths, didn't want to give up. He insisted we could find the rapist. Soon, we noticed a tall man in baggy clothes circling the block repeatedly. "That guy keeps coming back," Alina whispered through his mask. Greyjoy and I exchanged glances. Even though we weren't friends, we both knew something bad was about to happen when Alina's paper cup hit the ground. Like a shadow moving in your room at night, Alina rushed to the other side and grabbed the guy's coat, demanding to know where he was on a specific date. A struggle began, and I stood frozen on one side. Greyjoy stood next to me, a statue. The man threw a punch and yelled, "What's wrong with you, freak? Get off me." Alina fought back with a karate move he learned from online videos, rocking the guy back a few steps. Then, something terrifying happened. The man pulled out a shiny silver revolver from his pocket, pointed it at Alina's head and shouted, "Get off me, man." Alina didn't back down. He reached up and grabbed the guy's wrist, the one holding the gun. I retreated into the shadows, watching in horror as they struggled for the gun. Without saying a word, Greyjoy ran towards them. I watched in fear as he got closer to the dangerous weapon. I hid even deeper in the darkness. Suddenly I jumped and my heart pounded at the sound of the gunshot. The bullet bounced off the ground, and the man dropped his gun as Alina and Greyjoy pushed him down. I don't know if it was the second person or the gun going off, but the man quickly got up and ran away. I watched Alina and Greyjoy breathing heavily, with Alina more tired than Greyjoy. Before they came back to our side of the road, Greyjoy bent down and picked something up from the sidewalk. When they showed it to us, it was a small bag of meth. The guy they confronted was a drug dealer, which explained why he kept circling the block. Unfortunately, they didn't catch the elusive serial rapist. Greyjoy seemed the most embarrassed about what happened. Alina thought he still did something good by stopping a bad guy. As for me, I decided to stop joining them. I knew most of Alina's adventures ended up in fights, and sometimes he won, sometimes he lost. Occasionally his mask came off, but it didn't matter because people didn't know who he was anyway. I started to focus on my own life around this time. I was going to high school and wasn't thrilled about being placed in the lowest class in one of the city's worst schools. Alina wasn't going to high school. He was concentrating on his crime-fighting career. The truth is, he behaved badly, and he probably had undiagnosed ADHD. Looking back, our school couldn't really support him. The worst thing happened when Alina gathered money from his paper route, Christmas cash, and maybe some dollars from Howie's wallet to buy a police scanner. Like the karate moves he learned, Alina quickly figured out what each coded number on the scanner meant. 3 days after getting the scanner, Officer Jordan showed up in our neighborhood. He went door to door in the row house where Alina and I lived, showing a sketch of the mask Alina wore as the depth. Luckily for Alina, people in our neighborhood don't talk to the police, especially when it's about someone who lives there. This rule usually applies to drug dealers and gangsters, but they didn't make an exception for a guy trying to be a superhero. Officer Jordan came to my door last. My mom, who was home, said she hadn't seen anyone wearing that mask before, but called me over to take a look. Jordan told her he believed the suspect was a kid. I looked at the sketch and immediately recognized the mask. Still, I shook my head no. The officer then knelt down and looked into my eyes. He smelled like old coffee and fresh sweat, and his face looked puffy, with cold eyes. "Are you sure about that, son? No idea who this character could be?" Again, I shook my head no. He stood up, adjusted his uniform, and thanked my mom before leaving. But I knew he knew I was lying. A chill ran up my spine, lingering long after he left. After that, with a lot of pushing from me and Greyjoy, Alina finally decided to stop going out at night. "All right," he said. "I'll wait for something big over the scanner." It wasn't exactly reassuring, but it was enough to calm my nerves for the time being. One night, the three of us were hanging out in Howie's small basement, playing Xbox, sipping on canned beer, and occasionally hearing the police scanner buzzing in the background. We were almost done with the second-to-last level of the game when the scanner suddenly made a loud buzzing noise. It said, "Car 64, be advised 261 and possible 217 in progress on Yonge and Lexington." Neighbors said they heard screaming, likely female. Over. Greyjoy and I heard it, but we didn't pay much attention. Alina, on the other hand, sat up straight, dropping his controller to the floor. 10-4, this is Car 64, on pursuit to location, over. Alina jumped to his feet, rushing toward the scanner and putting his ear next to the speaker. Greyjoy and I stayed on the carpet. I asked, "What's up, Alina?" "Shh," he hissed and put his ear back to the radio. "There's a woman being attacked 10 blocks from us." I felt a chill at that moment. I paused the game, and we all listened. Several minutes passed with nothing but the low static sound. Then we heard the officer's voice again. "Dispatch, this is Car 64. We have a 217, requesting medical, over." From the officer's defeated tone, I didn't need to know the codes to figure out what happened. The woman was dead. "Roger, Car 64. Is the suspect in the area? Over." Negative, dispatch. Suspect is reported to be a number 1 male, possibly local. Witnesses say he fled the scene going west off Burlington. Notify all cars of the situation. 10-4. Greyjoy put his hand on Alina's shoulder, and I could see Alina was upset. Maybe they'll catch him, I said weakly. He's right, Greyjoy added. No point in going over there. Come on, calm down. It took a few minutes to calm Alina down, but he agreed to stay with us. We turned on the TV and flipped through channels, mostly watching cartoons. Greyjoy and I each opened a new beer. Alina didn't even finish his already opened one. He just sat there next to the police scanner, his eyes staring lifelessly into nothing. The next day, I saw the front cover of the newspaper. Hideous rape murder on Yonge and Lexington. Police officers are in hot pursuit of evasive culprit. This wasn't good. I didn't see Alina for 2 weeks straight. I went to his house a couple of times, but there was no answer. Sometimes his cousin would tell me Alina was out and that he didn't know where he was. I was scared. This was bad. All I knew about the suspect was what they said on the radio. Number 1 male. It didn't take me long to figure out that number 1 meant black. I didn't want to know how the Deps was trying to find the guy. By the 3rd week, on a Wednesday afternoon after school, I heard heavy tires on our block. Living in the projects, I developed a sense for when cops were around. I looked out a 2nd-story window and saw a squad car parked in front of Howie's place. My mind filled with fears, and I ran down the steps to our front stoop. I saw Officer Jordan, his face serious, his movements quick and stiff. He opened the passenger door, and there was Alina, his face exposed, bloody, one eye black and swollen, hands cuffed behind him. Jordan dragged Alina toward the door, and Alina didn't resist much, looking out of it mentally. The policeman knocked on the door, but no one answered. Howie was working double shifts and hadn't been home. I looked around and saw everyone on our block watching from their windows or over chain-link fences. "Where's your parent?" Jordan snapped, shaking Alina violently. Alina shrugged. Jordan shook him again, shouting in his face. I felt everyone on our block watching them more closely. Officer Jordan must have sensed it too, because after looking around, he went behind Alina and took off the cuffs. Alina was about to unlock his door and go inside, but Officer Jordan pressed his hand against the plywood, showing Jordan's mask in front of Alina's face with a strong grip. "Listen to me, you little troublemaker," he said in a low voice that echoed, making it audible for me. "Do yourself a favor and throw this and that outfit away. If I see you wearing it again anywhere, I'll arrest you for suspicion of mischief. And we'll see if we can even get a hate crime charge tied to you, eh?" He then threw the mask hard at Alina's feet. Hate crime. Oh Jesus, I thought. Had Alina actually been going around the neighborhood harassing random black guys because of what he'd heard on the radio? Officer Jordan adjusted his trousers, holding his heavy belt under his belly. "Your guardian or parent will be called later this week to inform them of the situation. Have a nice day." The eyes of the projects went back inside as Jordan's car drove off, and Alina's door slammed shut. I was relieved to know Alina was okay and thought the whole thing was over at the time. Looking back, I now know how wrong I was. The next day I invited Alina over, and we hung out in my room. We were there to play cards, but mostly, I needed to know what had happened. The first thing I asked was about the bruise on his left eye. "Did that Jordan guy do that to you?" He shook his head, almost smiling. "Nah, this was from one of the rapists." I must have looked at Alina with complete confusion. He told me there had been more than one rapist murderer. In fact, 5 or maybe even 10 involved in killing a girl over 2 weeks ago. He kept using the term gang rape. "I swear, James, there are literally hundreds of them." "What do you mean?" I asked. His eyes shifted to my door, perhaps checking that it was closed, before leaning in close and saying, "The blacks." My heart started pounding. Was I really hearing this? He then told me that John Dyke, at whose house he had stayed during his 2-week hunt, had told him about the uncontrollable lust that apparently all black people have for raping white women. This theory wasn't surprising, considering John Dyke was an active neo-Nazi who grew up in our projects a few years before us. What shocked me was that Alina had bought into this nonsense. The girl who'd been killed wasn't even white. I'm not even going to bother fighting street crime anymore, he lectured. The real criminals that are sucking our community dry are being protected by the government, the immigrants taking our jobs, the blacks and Spanish spreading drugs, the queers and lesbians poisoning our families. I had to stop him right there. Both my parents are Ukrainian Jews, so you can imagine how angry I was getting. Also, Alina, Greyjoy, and I were from 3 of only 5 white families in a mostly Hispanic neighborhood. How could he believe all this nonsense? You're being a jerk, I told him, feeling myself shake. Not used to standing up for myself or others. John Dyke is a Nazi. Everything you're saying now is wrong. And what you're doing around the city is worse. It's harassment, it's assault, it's racist, dude. Then he told me in a cold, robotic tone that racism doesn't exist. He asked me why I cared, saying these people were animals, not real human beings. I lost it at that point. We had a big shouting match, and by the end, Alina called me a commie kiki and stormed out of my room. I couldn't get his words out of my head the whole night, and I kept shaking and grinding my teeth together. In the following week, I mostly stayed in my room after school. When I checked my email account, I saw a message from Greyjoy. Oh great, the sidekick, I thought. Thinking it was Alina's attempt to make amends without apologizing, I deleted the message without reading it and focused on my homework. The next day, there was another message from Greyjoy. Again, I dumped it without reading. On the third day, having calmed down a bit, I was genuinely curious. To my surprise, the message had nothing to do with Alina. Greyjoy's message was a simple, "Hey, how's it going?" He even asked me about what homework was like in freshman year. Nothing related to what had happened between me and Alina at all. Pleased with the friendly hello, I responded in kind, asking him how he was doing. 15 minutes later, there was a reply, and we ended up chatting online into the late evening until about midnight. We continued doing this over the next couple of nights, and even started hanging out after school. It was kind of nice since we only knew each other through Alina, who seemed to be no longer in the picture. It was great that I had a new friend without completely separating myself from my past circle. Over the next month, I found out that Greyjoy and I had a lot in common. We liked the same video games, the same bands, the same movies, even the same foods. One Friday night, while munching on nachos and cheese at the local arcade, he confided in me about what it was like being Alina's sidekick. "It was terrible, man," he shared, shaking his head low. "Everything he wanted to do since he was 5 and I was 3, I had to go along with. He wanted to play Lone Ranger. I was Tonto. And any crazy adventure he wanted to do, I got stuck tagging along." He interrupted himself with a joyless scoff. "Did he ever tell you about the time when he was 9 and wanted to live out in the wilderness? He made me go with him to camp out in the woods at Barrett Park. By the time they found us, I had poison ivy all over my legs and had eaten a grub. Yuck." "Well, why did you go along with him?" I asked. "How did you two even end up as friends?" "Because," he said with emphasis, "his mother went to school with my mom. I guess she felt obligated after what happened to her." I nodded for a bit. That made sense for the initial relationship. "But, I began again. "Why did you just do whatever he said? You don't have to do what he wants just because he's your friend or your mom wants you to. You're your own person." He then hid his eyes behind his hands. I soon realized he was holding his head, looking as if he was about to be sick. I then heard him say, in a weak, trembling voice, "There's more. There's more. He just has this power over me. I just can't get loose of him. Fuck." Not knowing what to do and feeling very uncomfortable, I patted him on the shoulder and told him it'd be all right. I suppose there was more he could have told me, but honestly, I didn't want to know. Life was much easier for the next couple of months. No more craziness, no more nonsense. For the first time in my life, I had a friend who wasn't toxic and wasn't demanding all my time. I was doing well in school, and there were talks of putting me in a higher class for next fall. After Easter weekend, though, I got back in touch with Alina. It was early in the morning, 5 a.m. early. I could hear my phone vibrate on my makeshift bedside table, a spare floor tile on top of 2 milk cartons. I picked it up without looking at the caller ID and answered. "Hello?" I said, rubbing my eyes. James, I heard Alina's voice blare. You gotta let me come over. Jesus, I need your help. Hearing the panic in his voice jolted me awake. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Calm down. What's happening? There's a news story out about me. They're saying I killed Officer Jordan. My nerves locked. My body completely froze. No. Listen. I heard him beg over the phone. I'm about 10 minutes away. I'll sneak in through your front stoop when the coast is clear. Your parents should still be asleep, right? Yeah, I muttered, just audible, hoping he wouldn't hear. Great, he exclaimed, and I bit my lip hard. I'll be there soon. Wait, I shouted, and to my relief the call was still in progress. Why can't you hide at Dyke's? He's farther away from your house. I could hear him suck his teeth through the receiver. John's gone. He's been out of town for a while now. I got nowhere else to hide, man. Well, why would you hide here? I mean, we live in the same building, dude. The cops will find you here. I felt a heavy exhale waft through the receiver onto my eardrum. I don't think they've put two and two together yet, but they will soon. I'll explain when I get there. Just please help me out. Put two and two together? What did that mean? All right, you can stay in my room for the day until I get back from school. Then we'll have to figure something out for you. He thanked me, and I heard the short, quiet chime of my phone, indicating the call had ended. Having all this time to wait, my mind whirling from this sudden revelation, I searched the internet on my phone. Not long after, I found a news article titled, "City Cop Slain by Masked Man," which was complete with a video. Apparently, Officer Jordan had responded to a robbery that took place at a convenience store. I watched the video. The video was from a security camera videotaping the outside storefront. I could see, even in the grainy quality and the microscopic screen of my phone, one of the windows had been broken. Just then, as Officer Jordan was walking out of the front door, I saw it, a shadow moving fast right toward him. He turned his head just before the figure ran into him, but not fast enough. He fell to the ground, clutching his side. The article said he had been stabbed. I then watched in absolute horror as the cop reached for his gun holster, and the darkly veiled figure grabbed at it too, the two of them struggling until there was a sudden flash, and the officer lay motionless on the ground, a spray of dark fluid staining the concrete behind his head. The figure then shot his lifeless body twice more, before dropping the pistol and turning to leave. As it turned, I paused the video. The face was covered in a black skeletal mask with piercing silver-tinted eyes, the same from Alina's costume. Alina had still not arrived. Unsure how many knew the costume was his, I quickly dialed 911. When Alina got to my house, he was out of breath, panting and soaked with sweat. I got him a glass of tap water and sat him down on my bed. He then told me the story in his own words. Listen, last night I was at home, okay? They then proceeded to pin him to the floor and cuff his hands. My skin was throbbing from the speed of my pulse, and I didn't feel any pain, though in truth I was badly beaten up. They hauled Alina off kicking and screaming, explaining he was under arrest for the murder of police officer, Sergeant Jerome Fergus Jordan. It didn't take long for a jury to find Alina guilty. The police found the costume in the trash in front of his house, even though he said he had gotten rid of it well before the murder took place. They said he had a motive. Everyone in the projects knew Alina had issues with Officer Jordan, and they knew how much being a costumed crusader meant to him. However, it was hard to get people to testify. The tricky part was they never found his police scanner. Alina's court-appointed lawyer tried to use this fact to raise doubt because the prosecution argued that Alina had a police scanner, explaining how he knew about the robbery and Officer Jordan's presence. They treated him like an adult and gave him 25 years to life. It was hard to believe this happened to him, even with what he had done. He wasn't even 16. By the time I was almost done with high school, the entire neighborhood had forgotten about Alina. It was taboo to talk about him, and even Greyjoy and I avoided the subject. But honestly, with time we didn't care. We both turned things around. When Greyjoy finished middle school, he went to the same high school I did, making school so much better since I had my best friend to hang out with. By my senior year, we joined a few school clubs and started a games club of our own. After moving up to some college prep classes, my grades improved. I attended a careers workshop and decided to go into an apprenticeship program to become an electrician. Greyjoy did the same thing when he graduated. The summer after I graduated high school, Greyjoy and his mother were moving out to Minneapolis. Felt sad to see him go, but I understood that it might be best for him to leave behind all the bitter memories. On the day he was going to move, I helped him pack. Around lunchtime, we were in his room surrounded by tiny cardboard boxes with all his things. We took a break as we were both tired. His mother called him for something, and he asked me to wait for him. After a few minutes, I got bored and tried to lift a few more boxes. All the boxes had been light so far, mostly filled with clothes. However, the box I lifted was unexpectedly heavy. When I eased it off the stack, it fell from my grip and crashed to the floor. The sealed top opened up on impact, and all the items inside spilled out onto the carpet. I rushed to get everything back in the box, and that's when I saw what had given it so much weight. A black metallic radio. It was a police scanner. Alina's police scanner. The same one he swore had gone missing 3 days before the murder took place. I sat there, staring at it. I then heard footsteps outside the room and the door creaking open. What evidence did the police find that led to Alina's conviction? How did Alina explain his actions, especially regarding the costume and the police scanner? What role did Greyjoy play in the story, and how did his relationship with Alina change over time? What career path did James decide to pursue after attending a careers workshop? If you enjoyed this story and would like to explore more thought-provoking narratives, subscribe for regular updates. Your journey into intriguing tales awaits.